single cells, move on to the evolution of multicellularity, which of course involves the evolution of societies, because cells have to stick together. The key model system here is the volvox, which is a colonial alga, and they have coexisting colonies of sexually and asexually reproducing lineages. You can see the gametes developing within the wider body. And there are all sorts of different social questions to be asked about volvox. For example, they have simple phototactic responses which involve coordination of movement. All the little flagella that are facing outwards all the way around the sphere that you've got there need to coordinate their motion in order to move towards the light. It's a very salient question how they coordinate that motion, given that this is an extremely simple aggregation of cells. So this Heron paper goes through what we know about volvox, and it's kind of become a model system for the early evolution of multicellularity, and contains a bunch of different social questions. We have socials, moving on to slightly more complex organisms. We've got social cnidaria, social sea anemones, and I included this example because I challenge you to find a better paper title than this. Behind anemone lines. And these sea anemones exist as clones within which they reproduce asexually, and so you'll get a mat of sea anemones, each coming from a different clone. But where the clones meet, there's this anemone-free zone, is what they call it, anemone-free space where the two clones meet. And along the border, you have this differentiated form that they call a warrior. I love these kind of warlike metaphors that people come up with when deciding the names for things. But this is effectively a morph that is specialized for conflict with another clone. And behind this, like within the body of the clone, you have ones which are specialized for reproducing. And so you have two kind of castes of sea anemone, and you can imagine that the warrior clone, which is less reproductive, is effectively being altruistic. So there's some nice discussion of that in there. Getting on to some slightly more things that you might imagine are slightly more likely to be social. We've got pistol shrimps. They can be eusocial with queens and workers, much as you know about in honeybees and wasps and ants. I won't dwell too much on this because we've had it in a lecture before. We've had it in a first-year lecture in ecology and evolution. They live on coral, and they have a range of all the way from solitary to social. And Duffy and MacDonald found that across a phylogeny of snapping shrimps, they found that the social behaviour, being eusocial with queens and workers, was almost perfectly correlated with the dispersal mode of the larvae. If the larvae were swimming, i.e. if they disperse far and wide into the water column, then it's very difficult for you to evolve to be eusocial, where offspring are staying behind in their nate or coral. Whereas if you have larvae that don't swim and just crawl around and crawl a very short distance, that places the larvae much more closely in contact with the generation above, sets the stage for the evolution of prolonged interactions between generations, and that is creates the situation for the evolution of social behaviour. So they found that the larval form is almost perfectly associated with social behaviour across that phylogeny. You've got a bunch of different social spiders, broadly divided into colonial spiders, where spiders have webs which kind of they build webs next to each other, and their webs can form immense webs. Like collectively, they can kind of encase trees. This is one example from Pakistan, where the spiders have basically enshrouded the whole vegetation in what looks like one massive web. But these colonial spiders, while they put their webs together, they will each make an individual web and catch their own prey. So effectively they're kind of living in proximity but not being social. And then you have kind of truly social spiders where they will share a web, and within that they will hunt collectively. So this is a bunch of Stegodiphyus spiders collectively hunting a massive locust, something which is far bigger than they would otherwise be able to catch. And so they have this collective hunting, and they share lots of other things. Like, so they'll have alloparental care, for example. So some of the spiders will care for the offspring of others. And so that brings a whole bunch of other questions about the evolution of that behaviour and the evolution of altruism in these. And this Salomon et al. Paper, for example, shows that if you feed, a little bit like the thrips I was talking about in the workshop, if you create a situation where the web is full of nutrients, if you feed them prey which is full of a nutrient which is limiting, like for spiders that's lipids, if you artificially feed a web prey which is full of lipids, the more spiders there are in the web, the number of adult females in the web that are reproductive, that are producing their own offspring, stays the same. Like they've all got enough nutrition to go around. But if you feed them, that's the open circles. If you feed them lipid, if you feed them their favourite food, then everybody breeds, regardless of how many females are in the web. But if you feed them something they don't like so much, which is prey that are full of protein with not so much lipid, that creates competition for the limited lipids there are available. And in that case, if you're feeding them protein food rather than lipid food, the more females there are in the web, the fewer of them, percentage-wise, end up reproductive. So, in other words, multi-female webs with loads of females, if you restrict the food available, some of them become non-reproductive. A bit like those thrips I was telling you about. In the smaller nests, there are more non-reproductive females. So yeah, quite a lot of work done. Salomon is a big name in social spider work. Go and have a look up her papers. You have also, related to spiders, you have extended sociality in mites. Mites are minuscule, tend to be minuscule, related to ticks. They live all over the place. They can be specialised to live on animals. They can be specialised to live on leaves like these ones. But they have an extended family life, so the offspring will often stay behind and help make nests, feed future generations of offspring. Males will rove around defending the territory from other males. You have a social life which is very much like a vertebrate that you might encounter, but instead it's in a mite, an arachnid, which is less than 0.5 millimetre long. Really cool. Interestingly, these guys are also haplodiploid, more beams on haplodiploidy. We'll come back to it in new sociality. But interestingly, they don't have, mites don't have queens and workers. They're not eusocial in the sense that bees, ants and wasps are. So that makes them very interesting.